On April 26, 1986, 50,000 people went to bed in a thriving Soviet city. 36 hours later, every single one of them was gone. They left behind their homes, their belongings, their entire lives. This is Pripyat, Ukraine, the city that was erased in a single weekend. And what the Soviet government tried to hide will chill you to your core. 2 kilometers from Pripyat sat the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was the pride of the Soviet Union, a symbol of their technological superiority. On the night of April 25, 1986, engineers were conducting a safety test on Reactor Four. It was supposed to be routine, a simple experiment to see if the reactor could survive a power outage. But at 1:23 a.m. on April 26th, something went catastrophically wrong. The reactor exploded with the force of 500 atomic bombs. The blast was so powerful, it blew the 1,000-ton steel lid off the reactor core like a bottle cap. Radioactive material shot 3,000 feet into the air. And the people of Pripyat, sleeping peacefully 2 kilometers away, had no idea their lives had just changed forever. Here's what makes this terrifying. The Soviet government knew immediately. They knew the reactor had exploded. They knew radiation was spreading. They knew people were in danger. But they didn't tell anyone. Not the citizens of Pripyat. Not the firefighters rushing to the scene. Not even the plant workers who went back to work the next morning. For 36 hours, 50,000 people went about their normal lives while invisible death surrounded them. Children played outside. Pregnant women hung laundry. Families prepared for the May Day celebrations. And with every breath, every step, every moment, they were absorbing radiation that would kill them slowly over the coming years. The firefighters who responded that night had no idea what they were walking into. They weren't given protective gear. Nobody told them this wasn't a normal fire. They climbed onto the roof of the burning reactor. They stood directly above the exposed core. The radiation levels were so high that standing there for 5 minutes guaranteed death. Most of those firefighters were dead within weeks. Their bodies were so radioactive they had to be buried in lead coffins encased in concrete. Even now, 38 years later, their graves are too dangerous to visit without protection. Vasily Ignatenko was one of those firefighters. He was 25 years old, newly married. His wife Lyudmila was pregnant. She watched him die over 14 days as the radiation destroyed his body from the inside. His skin turned black. His organs liquefied. He died in agony, and Lyudmila was forbidden from touching him. Their baby was born months later and died within hours. The radiation Lyudmila absorbed while caring for her dying husband had passed to their child. But still, the Soviet government said nothing. On April 27th, 36 hours after the explosion, Pripyat looked normal. People went to work. Kids went to school. Weddings were held. Life continued as if nothing had happened. The only clue something was wrong. Helicopters circling overhead. Military vehicles on the streets. And a strange metallic taste in the air that people couldn't explain. Some residents noticed their children vomiting. Headaches. Nosebleeds. But Soviet doctors told them it was spring allergies. Nothing to worry about. Go back to your lives. Finally, on April 27th at 2 p.m., the government made an announcement. Over loudspeakers throughout the city, a calm voice told residents to prepare for a temporary evacuation. 3 days, they said. Maybe a week at most. Pack light. Take only what you need. Leave everything else. You'll be back soon. It was a lie. They knew it was a lie. But 50,000 people believed them. They packed small bags. They left their photo albums, their furniture, their pets, their entire lives sitting in their apartments because they thought they were coming back. Buses arrived at 2 p.m. By nightfall, Pripyat was empty. 50,000 people evacuated in less than 3 hours. It remains the fastest civilian evacuation in history, and not a single one of them ever returned. Let me paint you a picture of what Pripyat looks like today. Imagine walking through a city where time stopped on April 27th, 1986. Apartments with dishes still on tables. Beds made, waiting for people who will never sleep in them again. Schools with textbooks open to the lessons that were never finished. A hospital with baby cribs lined up in the maternity ward. Tiny shoes and blankets left behind. In one apartment, a child's homework sits on a desk. The date at the top reads April 26th, 1986. The assignment was never turned in. In another building, a family photo hangs on the wall. A mother, father, and 2 children smiling at the camera. You wonder where they are now, if they're still alive, if they ever understood what happened to them. But the most haunting location in all of Pripyat is the amusement park. It was supposed to open on May 1st, 1986, for the May Day celebrations. The Ferris wheel was installed. The bumper cars were ready. Children had been talking about it for weeks. They were counting down the days. Then the reactor exploded 5 days before opening day. The amusement park never opened. It sits there now, frozen in time. The Ferris wheel's yellow paint is faded and peeling. The bumper cars are rusted and overturned. Vines grow through the seats. Trees push through the concrete. Nature is slowly reclaiming what humans abandoned. Photographers who visit Pripyat say the amusement park is the hardest place to see, because it represents childhood joy that was stolen, innocence that was destroyed, a future that never happened. Here's what the Soviet government didn't tell people. The radiation released from Chernobyl was 400 times more than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It contaminated an area the size of Switzerland. Over 300,000 people were eventually evacuated from the surrounding regions. But the initial evacuation of Pripyat was handled so poorly that many residents received fatal doses of radiation before they even got on the buses. Pregnant women, children, elderly people, they stood in lines for hours waiting to evacuate, breathing radioactive air, standing on contaminated ground. Some estimates suggest that over 93,000 people will die from cancer caused by Chernobyl radiation exposure. But the Soviet Union, and later Russia and Ukraine, have never released accurate numbers. The true death toll remains unknown. After the evacuation, the Soviet government sent in the liquidators. These were soldiers, firefighters, miners, and volunteers tasked with cleaning up the disaster. Over 600,000 people served as liquidators between 1986 and 1990. Their job was to remove radioactive debris, to build a concrete sarcophagus over the destroyed reactor, to decontaminate the surrounding areas. They were told it was their patriotic duty. Many were forced to participate. They were given minimal protective equipment. Some were nothing more than cloth masks and gloves. They worked in shifts measured in seconds because the radiation was so intense. 45 seconds on the roof of the reactor. That was the maximum exposure time. After that, you had to leave or risk certain death. Thousands of liquidators died in the years following. Tens of thousands more developed cancers, organ failures, genetic mutations. Their children were born with horrific birth defects. The Soviet government promised them medals, pensions, recognition. Most received nothing. One of the most disturbing aspects of Chernobyl is what happened to the animals. When people evacuated, they were forced to leave their pets behind. Dogs, cats, birds, livestock. Thousands of animals were left in Pripyat and the surrounding villages. Within days, packs of abandoned dogs roamed the empty streets. Cats hid in buildings, waiting for their owners to return. The Soviet government declared the animals contaminated. They sent in shooting squads. Soldiers went building to building, floor to floor, shooting every animal they found. Dogs who recognized the sound of human footsteps would run toward the soldiers, tails wagging, thinking they were being rescued. Instead, they were killed. Witnesses say the soldiers cried as they did it. But orders were orders. Thousands of pets were shot and buried in mass graves. The few animals that escaped into the forests became the ancestors of the wildlife that lives in the Chernobyl exclusion zone today. And here's something that will disturb you. The exclusion zone, the 30-kilometer radius around Chernobyl that was declared too dangerous for human habitation, is now teeming with wildlife. Wolves, bears, boars, lynx, rare bird species. The animal population has exploded because humans are gone. Scientists call it an unintentional nature preserve. Animals thrive there despite the radiation. Does that mean it's safe? Absolutely not. Studies show animals in the zone have genetic mutations, shorter lifespans, higher cancer rates. But there are so many of them because there are no humans to hunt them, no cars to hit them, no pollution. The radiation is slowly killing them, but they're still doing better than they did when humans were around. It's a dark reflection on humanity. Then a radiated wasteland is a better environment for wildlife than a city full of people. In 2011, the Ukrainian government started allowing limited tourism to Pripyat. You could take a guided tour through the exclusion zone. Walk the empty streets. See the abandoned apartments. Stand in front of the Ferris wheel. Thousands of tourists visit every year. They take selfies in gas masks. They pose in front of radioactive buildings. Some tour guides say it's disrespectful. That Pripyat is a graveyard and should be treated as such. Others argue that people need to see it, to understand what happened, to remember the cost of negligence and lies. But there are rules. Don't touch anything. Don't sit on any surfaces. Don't pick up souvenirs. Every object in Pripyat is contaminated. In 2019, a tourist pocketed a small radioactive fragment as a keepsake. Airport security caught it when his bag set off radiation detectors. He was arrested and banned from Ukraine. Tour guides tell stories about strange occurrences in Pripyat. Footsteps in empty buildings. Shadows moving past windows. Voices echoing through hallways. One guide said he was leading a group through an apartment complex when they all heard a child laughing. It came from a floor above them. When they went to investigate, the floor was empty. Another guide reported seeing lights flickering in a building that has had no electricity for 38 years. Skeptics say it's imagination, that the eerie atmosphere makes people see things that aren't there. But believers say the city is haunted by the people who died because of it, that their spirits remain, waiting for justice that will never come. The Soviet government tried to bury the truth about Chernobyl. They denied the explosion for days. When radiation detectors in Sweden picked up abnormal levels and demanded an explanation, the Soviets finally admitted something had happened. But they minimized it, downplayed the danger, lied about the death toll. Even today, the official Soviet death count is 31. 31 people. That number only includes the immediate deaths, the firefighters and plant workers who died in the first few weeks. It doesn't count the liquidators, the evacuees, the children born with cancer, the families destroyed. Independent researchers estimate the true death toll is closer to 100,000. But we'll never know for certain because the Soviet Union destroyed records, falsified data, silenced witnesses. In 2019, the HBO series Chernobyl brought global attention to the disaster. It depicted the heroism of the people who responded, the cowardice of the government officials who lied, the tragedy of the innocent victims. The series was praised for its accuracy, though some criticized it for dramatizing certain events. But what it did successfully was remind the world that Chernobyl happened, that it wasn't ancient history, that the consequences are still unfolding. The exclusion zone will remain dangerously radioactive for 20,000 years. 20,000 years. That's longer than human civilization has existed. Our descendants, hundreds of generations from now, will still be dealing with what happened on April 26th, 1986. Pripyat stands as a monument to what happens when governments prioritize image over safety, when leaders lie to protect themselves instead of their people, when technological ambition outpaces responsibility. The city that was supposed to represent Soviet achievement became a symbol of Soviet failure. And the people who paid the price weren't the officials who made the decisions. They were the firefighters who ran toward danger without knowing what it was. The mothers who packed small bags thinking they'd be home in 3 days. The children who played outside while invisible death surrounded them. If you ever see footage of Pripyat, you'll notice one thing that's missing. Sound. The city is silent. No birds. No insects. No rustling leaves. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. That makes you hold your breath. It's the silence of a place that should be full of life, but isn't. A city that should have traffic and laughter and music and conversation. Instead, it has nothing. Just empty buildings slowly crumbling. Nature slowly reclaiming. Time slowly erasing what was once there. Pripyat will never be inhabited again. Never rebuilt. Never restored. It exists now only as a warning. A reminder. A ghost. And every year, it becomes harder to see what it once was. The buildings collapse. The paint fades. The photographs yellow. The people who live there are aging, dying, taking their memories with them. Soon, there will be nobody left who remembers Pripyat as a living city. It will exist only in documentaries, in photographs, in stories like this one. But here's what they don't want you to forget. Chernobyl wasn't an accident. It was the result of choices. Design flaws that were known and ignored. Safety protocols that were skipped to save time. A government that valued secrecy over honesty. And when disaster struck, that same government chose to protect itself instead of its people. 50,000 residents could have been evacuated immediately. Instead, they were left to absorb radiation for 36 hours because officials didn't want to admit they'd lost control. How many lives could have been saved if the truth had been told on April 26th instead of April 27th? How many cancers could have been prevented? How many children could have lived? Pripyat is a scar on the earth, a wound that will never heal. And it exists because powerful people made decisions that they never had to face the consequences of. The officials who delayed the evacuation didn't live in Pripyat. Their children didn't play in the contaminated playgrounds. Their families didn't drink the poison water. They were safe in Moscow, managing the narrative, controlling the story, protecting their reputations while 50,000 people's lives crumbled. This city still stands today, frozen, silent, waiting. You can visit it if you want. Walk the same streets those 50,000 people walked. See the same buildings they called home. Stand in the shadow of the Ferris wheel that never turned. But you can't stay. You can only visit for a few hours before the radiation exposure becomes dangerous. Even 38 years later, Pripyat belongs to the dead, and it will for the next 20,000 years. So why does Pripyat matter? Why should you care about a city that's been empty for nearly 4 decades? Because Pripyat is a mirror. It shows us what happens when truth becomes optional, when safety becomes negotiable, when human lives become statistics. The people who lived there weren't careless. They didn't take risks. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives, trusting that their government would protect them. That trust was betrayed, and they paid for it with their futures. There are other Pripyats waiting to happen, other disasters brewing in places where profit matters more than people, where secrecy matters more than safety, where image matters more than truth. And when those disasters come, the people who cause them will be safe, protected, insulated, while everyone else pays the price. Pripyat is still there, right now. As you watch this, buildings crumbling, paint peeling, nature advancing, time erasing. But some things can't be erased. The names of the 50,000 who lost their homes, the faces of the firefighters who died in agony, the memory of the children who never got to ride that Ferris wheel. Those things remain, in photographs, in documents, in stories. And as long as people keep telling those stories, Pripyat will never truly be forgotten. What happened there wasn't inevitable. It was preventable. And that's what makes it unforgivable. Every death, every cancer, every destroyed life, every child born with mutations, all of it could have been avoided if the right choices had been made. If truth had been valued over pride. If people had mattered more than politics. The next time someone tells you that transparency doesn't matter, that secrecy is necessary, that the truth can wait, remember Pripyat. Remember what happens when those in power decide they know better than the people they're supposed to protect. Remember the 36 hours of lies that cost 50,000 people everything. Remember that silence has a price, and someone always pays it. Pripyat waits in silence, a city of ghosts, a monument to lies, a warning written in concrete and radiation. And if we're paying attention, if we're listening, if we're learning, then maybe those 50,000 people didn't lose everything for nothing. Maybe their story becomes the reason we demand better. Expect more. Accept less. Maybe Pripyat becomes the last city that dies because powerful people decided the truth could wait. But I doubt it. Because history repeats. Power corrupts. And somewhere right now, someone is making the same choices that destroyed Pripyat. Prioritizing image over safety. Profit over people. Secrecy over truth. And when that disaster comes, we'll act shocked. We'll demand accountability. We'll promise it will never happen again. Just like we did after Pripyat. Just like we always do. The question is, are you paying attention? Are you asking questions? Are you demanding truth? Or are you trusting that the people in power have your best interests at heart? Because the people of Pripyat trusted too. And look where that trust got them. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. It should. If it made you angry, even better. Because anger leads to questions. Questions lead to truth. And truth is the only thing that prevents the next Pripyat from happening. The stories they try to bury are the ones that matter most. And this one deserves to be remembered, not just for what happened, but for what it teaches us about what could happen again.